Good evening, everyone. The town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on Treaty 6 territory and Métis Nation Region Number 4. These are the traditional territories and ancestral lands of Indigenous peoples, including the Plains Cree First Nations, Assiniboine-Winawak Rocky Mountain First Nations, Stoney, Tsuut'ina, Nakota, Denesalee, Saulteaux, Mountain Métis, Michif, and many other communities that continue to enrich the land on which the town of Hinton was established. With this sentiment, I call the July 13th, 2021 Standing Committee meeting to order. Adoption of agenda. Administration, any changes to the agenda?
No changes.
Okay, council, anyone?
Yes, I think at this point, I would like to ask that items 5 and 6 be removed from the agenda or postponed to the next meeting. The chair of the committee that's been working on these for the last 6 months is unable to make it today. And I think the mayor is who has the most interaction back and forth with these documents. So I think we're likely not going to be that proactive with them without our mayor being here. And I just think he should be a big part of this discussion. Thank you. Yeah, I guess I'll make the direction to amend the standing committee agenda to remove items 5 and 6.
Council. Councilor Haas.
Well, I guess my mind is, yeah, the mayor isn't here as the chair, but I mean, all the work has been done. And I don't see why we can't have a conversation about it. We've got administration here that's working mostly on this document. So I would recommend we still proceed with it. So those are my
Councilor Stash.
Mr. Chair, I don't see any reason to delay the discussion either. It's just standing committee meeting today that we can have a discussion. Nothing prevents us from having further discussion down the road if there's questions or concerns.
I'm of the same mind. It's the first appearance at standing committee, and other members of the committee that is bringing this forward will be present. So I'm eager to have the discussion tonight as planned. So, but with that said, I guess we do have the direction on the board. Anybody wish to speak? Anyone else? Okay, item 9. Brent, would like to. Oh, okay. Yep. Are the people at home will be able to see that?
Yes, I see it. We don't see it here.
Okay. The direction that the standing committee meeting agenda of July 13th, 2021 remove action items 5 and 6. All those in favor? All those opposed? It's the motion's directions defeated. Number 3. Any other? Councilor Haas.
I'd like to move that we accept, sorry, pardon me, I'm changing my screen here. That we accept the standing committee agenda for July 13th, 2021 as it's.
Any discussion? And all those in favor? That passes. Okay. Ms. Rendell, any citizens minute with council?
No citizens wish to speak to council.
All right, that takes us on to our action items then. Action item 1, accessible transportation service delivery next steps. And I will hand that off to CIO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Over the course of 2021, administration has been operating at a reduced service delivery scope for accessible transportation services as an agreement with the Evergreens Foundation was terminated in 2020 due to an unanticipated application to the Labor Relations Board regarding the transfer of service from the town to the foundation. Administration worked to identify other agencies that may be suitable to provide these services, and as well worked with Evergreens to gauge interest in re-entering into the agreement, as the labor relations issue would not pose any further negative impacts in the transfer of service. Evergreens declined to the town's request, and no alternative solution determined at this time. With this position, council has several options to consider to provide these services to the town. Given the reduction in service hours and continued decline in ridership, the recommended action for this item is that committee recommend council reinstate accessible transportation services as a permanent town delivered service area with the current limited service levels. I do have Ms. Bouchard here to assist in answering any of council's questions. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Olson. Council, questions for administration? Councillor Haas.
Thank you, administration. Just one quick question, I guess, about, so I was trying to think back when we made the decision and whether COVID restrictions were in place at that time, but now with COVID opening, with restrictions changing, I know certain organizations are probably going to be opening their doors as well. I think one of them is the adult day center potentially, which would increase maybe some of that usership. So I guess my concern is if we were to leave it at a limited amount, would that hinder some of that transportation for those individuals or any other individuals, I guess, that might have been more restricted with COVID?
CEO Olson.
Ms. Bouchard.
I can speak to that. So I've been in connection with the adult day program, Glenn Skimmings, and we were chatting last week, and then we chatted actually yesterday. And so, yeah, so we are moving forward. The adult day program opens up next Tuesday, and the service will remain. 9:30 will be pickup, and then 1:30 will be the drop-off time for community citizens, Pine Valley Lodge, as well as continuing care.
Thank you.
Councillor Haas.
Yep, thank you.
Council, any other questions for admin? Councillor Nelson.
I guess one of the options that isn't here is that we reinstate the service with the previous service level that we had approved. So that from what I gather, the service level was reduced partially due to COVID, and the budget was reduced because of the third-party funding agreement. So based on our current budget that we have and what's been approved, there's not really any way to reinstate at the previously approved service level.
CEO Olson.
Mr. Chair, so the previously approved service level being what we moved from previous to moving the service to the Evergreens Foundation. So that number of hours per week and that. So without a budget amendment, there isn't any way to move that service level higher. We've been operating with the amount of money that we've had kind of earmarked for this service through 2021. And at this time, it's been, the service has been meeting the needs of the patrons. In order to have the funds to increase that service level, there would need to be a budget amendment or some sort of funding secured.
All right, thank you. Myself next. CEO Olson, is a return to the previous service level something that administration is considering in the next budget cycle, or would that require some sort of direction from council?
I think, Mr. Chair, that is something that through the budget process for 2022, council could provide some direction for us to include. There's time enough to do that with the service levels remaining as they are within the budget that we have for 2021. And looking at any further change into 2022 if no budget amendment for 2021 is required or desired by council.
Thank you. Councillor Haas or something?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess, I mean, option number 3 with potentially keeping the way it is and certainly continuing to try and reestablish with an external party. I know that from the report, other parties have been approached or have looked at it. Have we exhausted all our options potentially in the size of our community for a potential third party or external party to take this over at this point? Or, you know, like if council were to say, you know, decide on option 3, is that really an option? Honestly, I guess looking at from the report.
I'll let you, Ms. Bouchard, to support that answer.
I would say the options, the reasonable options, yes, to run this kind of service with the budget that we have right now is that's about the most. It's you're not going to make money off of it. This kind of service, and I think right now, where we have the budget at, I think we can run it successfully. And I can just speak to that now running it now that things have opened up. There hasn't been a huge increase in ridership, and our survey numbers speak to that. And yeah, and I guess we can go from there what the demand will look like. But I think I don't foresee many private businesses touching this because you're paying more in insurance costs to insure a vehicle that equals just about $25,000 a year. And then connected with NeighborLink, all the nonprofits, and it's just something that they can't financially do at this time.
Thank you. That helps. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other? Councilor Nelson.
I'd like to make a direction, standards number 2. The committee recommend council reinstate accessible transportation services as a permanent town delivered service area with current limited service levels for the remainder of 2021 and increased service levels for 2022 to be determined through the 2022 to 2024 operational budget process. And if I can speak to it, as long as that motion still allows us to have maintained service levels, I know the recommendation shows increased, but maintaining might be the best option. I think from a process standpoint, making sure that the public has an opportunity to weigh in, and even for us to have the opportunity to spend some time looking at the transit study that we did 3 years ago and some of the data that we had then. It's really difficult making decisions during COVID when people haven't been doing anything. And ultimately, I love the concept of it being the third party arrangement. I thought was perfect, and I really appreciate administration going down that path because it was the best service for the best cost of taxpayers. But that ended up falling through, and it doesn't sound like that group is wanting to pick it up at this time. So thank you.
Okay, Council, we have a direction on the board. Council, any comments? Councilor Haas.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to still explore. I realize that maybe, but things might change over the next, and I guess that's where I was looking at number 3 is having a date by June 30th of 2022, still looking into the possibilities of agreements with an external party is still available to us. And then how does that work in the if that were the direction was number 3, how would it work budget wise for 2022 to 2024? Because how I read it is that we would keep them at the limited service levels up to June 30th of 2022, but what would occur after that? Isn't clear in that particular option. So that's my question. Administration.
Bouchard.
So yeah, so we would continue the service, the current service that we're doing right now, and then if we don't have anything secured by June 30th, 2022, in the meantime, we would still reach out to find potential external agencies that we would probably do a RFP put it out there and then see what we get, and then bring it back to the standing committee.
So to clarify, if I may, so to clarify then, if we were to do that process, because it'll help me understand the option 2 better. If we were to do that process, and then after that report would come back to standing committee after June 30th, 2022, then increasing the service level wouldn't happen until the next budget year, correct? So we'd ultimately be looking at a longer period of time at the limited service potentially, if we couldn't find an external party.
Yeah, so we would be still working with this same budget in 2022, and then 2023 is where we would have to look at an increased budget. So technically we would be, if we chose option 3, we would still be where we're at right now until we found an external agency.
Okay. All right. Thank you, administration. It just helps me clarify between the two before making a decision. Thank you.
Council, anything else about the direction that's on board? Councilor Ross.
Is it, if option 2 if we were to pass, would then any conversations about external parties that would cease, right? We wouldn't be exploring that any further unless somebody comes to council or comes to the town and says, hey, we'd like to take this over. Is that how I understand, if I understand that correctly?
Yeah, if we saw, let's say if an agency approached us, or if there was there's a need, or we sometimes get that with our Hinton Kids for Success, transportation, or, just having those kind of conversations in the community. Absolutely. If it makes sense for an external agency to take this service over, I think that's always an option. We're always keeping in mind of what's the best use of our dollars, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Council, anyone else? Not seeing anybody in the queue. Call the questions. Okay. All right. So direction that committee recommend council reinstate accessible transportation services as a permanent town delivered service area with current limited service levels for the remainder of 2021 and increased service levels for 2022 to be determined through the 2022 to 2024 operational budget process. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Okay, council, anything else for this item? So none, we'll move on to the action item number 2. The 2021 financial operating update and capital status report from April 30, 2021. CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report is before council tonight as a summary of the work performed. Oops, my apologies, I'll put my wrong notes. This item is before council tonight as information supporting awareness of the town's financial position as of the end of April 2021. The analysis confirms that the performance against budget overall is on target. However, we are seeing certain departments impacted by the effects of the pandemic, which will require some ongoing monitoring by council and administration. I do have Mr. Osmond here tonight, and I turn things over to him to highlight anything further before we receive council's questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there were 4 main areas with regards to the review of the financial update that I wanted to bring council's attention to. They're the 4 areas of largest variance from budget. The first is with regards to municipal property taxes. Municipal property taxes are levied in May, which is after the period of this report. So those numbers do show below kind of the target you would expect as of the end of the 4th month of the year. There is also in the other revenue governance and administration category, provincial grant revenue in particular tied to capital and operating projects. These are largely completed through the midpoint of the year, and so those do tend to lag behind in terms of performance against budget. There was also in the protective services section of the budget, there was an invoice for the first quarter of RCMP member services. It was processed in mid-May. That billing often gets a little bit delayed because of the federal year-end cutoff. And then finally, in infrastructure services, particularly with regards to fleet and building expenses, which of course aren't derived on monthly expenditures. They come as needed throughout the year. And so that's another area where we see deviation from where we would expect it to be 4 months into the year. Neither of those highlight large areas of concern. They're areas we expect the budget to vary at this point during the year. There are a couple of areas highlighted in the report where we are seeing impacts of COVID as we go forward. And administration will continue to keep an eye on them as we move forward. I suspect when we get the second quarter financial update at the end of August, that will come to council. I suspect at that point we'll have a fairly good picture of where we stand on that particular issue. CAO Olson, should I go on with the project updates or? Okay.
Yes, please.
So beginning on page 3 of the report, page 13 of the agenda, I have a section on project updates. So the process on which we report projects is changing. For this report, we've managed to categorize the projects into 5 different areas, that being new projects for 2021, carry forwards from prior years, projects that are complete or reported complete in 2021, projects that are canceled or deferred. Canceled and deferred projects may be in the process of coming to council for approval for cancellation or deferral. There are a couple of them that are on their way through the process now. So the project reporting is divided into 2 sections, the first being operating. The report shows the status of the project, being one of those 4 categories: the project name, what we've called the financial project classification from the capital budget, essentially the major function area where the project relies, although not necessarily where the project manager is employed. The amount of budget available to that project in 2021, and although it doesn't apply to the operating projects, the 2021 actual costs to date. There are a couple of caveats on this information. Finance is continuing to investigate prior year expenses on some of the carry forward projects. There are a couple of projects that note that they have a negative budget carry forward for 2021. We believe that to still be just a misalignment between the past expenses and budget. And we will correct those as we go forward. As we move into the second quarter report, the format of this will change so that we're reporting less on the financial outcome of the project and more on the timeline of the project, major milestone targets within the project timeline, and where we will continue from there. So in terms of operating projects, we have 15 open operating projects at the beginning of 2021 with 11 new projects. The administration confirmed that 3 of these are canceled, and 3 are confirmed complete, leaving only 9 carry forward projects from prior years. There are 11 new projects for 2021 with a combined budget of $976,000. And so all of those will be reported on in the second quarter reporting, even if it's to finalize the completion or closure of that project. Moving on to the capital projects, there were 64 capital projects at the beginning of 2021, 32 new projects identified in the capital budget. Administration has confirmed that 6 of these projects were canceled, 2 have been deferred to a future year or will be canceled and deferred. 28 are confirmed complete on the list, leaving only 28 carry forward projects from prior years. The 28 carry forwards have a remaining budget of $5.9 million, and the 32 new projects for 2021 have a combined budget of just shy of $6.4 million. At the time of the report, April 30th, 2021, there had been $781,000 in current year expenses, or approximately 6% of the budget expended. The qualifications that we had on the operating projects mean that there are a couple of projects that we're trying to reconcile with their prior year budgets and expenses to resolve why they appear as being overexpended in the report. And we will have that resolved when we come back with the second quarter report. So that is the update on the financial reporting, as well as the operating and capital project status reports.
Thank you, Mr. Osmond and Mitt. I have Councillor Haas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just have a couple of questions about going back to the operating projects. I guess one that stands out for me is the line fire underwriters study under new protective services. It has a negative 23,000 there. I'm just curious on, what exactly, I don't recall this, and I'm sure it is, but what it is and why it's at a negative compared to the others.
Mr. Osmond.
That is an error in number in that line. There hasn't been anything expended on that project. I'm just trying to see if I have the spreadsheet open to confirm for you what that project looks like. The fire underwriters study has a 2021 budget of $40,000, and at the time of the report had no expenditures.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I have Councillor Race in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 4 of 7, fourth item down, the council fire management reporting software. And I guess this question is probably more suited to our fire chief, but it's saying that it's canceled. And at the time when we did that big study, it was saying that this software program was so important to us, it would take care of 13 of the 25 recommendations from that report. So are we canceling this and putting something else in its place?
Thank you, Councillor.
I believe Mr. Osmond has some to do.
To Councillor Race through the chair, the fire management reporting software project was reviewed with the new fire chief when he joined the organization a short while ago. And the capital project, as it was defined he is going to come forward with a proposal that would see us refocus on a different type of software. And because of the costs and the way that project would come forward, it will be able to be handled through the operating budget. So that's one of the examples of a project that I've listed as canceled. The fire chief is working on preparing a report for council to make that proposal. So it's not technically canceled until council says so. But in the process of things, that is certainly coming up on your radar.
Councilor Rice.
So just quickly, sir, so I guess we will just wait till we hear from the fire chief to see if we're still working with the county on trying to obtain this or work with them. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, to Councillor Race through the chair, the fire chief will provide a report on the alternative software he would like to see.
Thank you.
Council, anything else? Councilor Nelson.
Yeah, first off, I really like the look of this and how things are laid out. I'm happy that I think it's canceled, comes to council first. The only thing that gave me a bit of pause is in your summary, you, Mr. Osmond, you mentioned that the next report would be less on the financial side and more on the timeline side. I love the addition of the timeline side, and I would love the financial side to stay, not be reduced. So I was just looking for some context because I don't want to lose the financial. Like I really, this is my favorite financial report that I've read in my 3.5 years. So thank you.
So was there a question in there?
Well, just because you had said that there would be less
Okay.
financial, more on timeline.
Okay, so I guess just some clarity on what we could expect in the next one.
Yeah, to Councillor Nelson through the chair, the financial component of the report is not set to change, but when we get down to the capital, it currently just focuses on what is the budget and what's been expended. And I think in order to help council understand where capital projects are, we need to be providing information about kind of where are we in the project and what is the target date. So it's the addition of that portion. It's not that we'll reduce any financial information. So that's my misspeaking. Sorry.
Oh, that's perfect. I just really liked it and didn't want to see it go. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any follow up on that, Councilor Nelson? Okay. Council, anything else for this one? Councilor Nelson.
I'd like to move that council accept the 2021 financial operating update and capital status report, April 30th, 2021 for information. Thank you.
Councilor Haas.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought we were just talking about the operating and capital. I have a few questions in regards to the budget summary before making any decision on that.
Councilor Nelson.
If there's no opposition, I'll happily withdraw.
Okay, I just have a few questions. I'm specifically on page 19 of 99. And just a couple of things. It looked like we're on track with everything, but there's a couple of things that jumped out at me, and I'm sure it's movement of numbers and stuff, but one in particular, so disaster services under protective services, I see 806.8%. We budgeted for 7,900, but we're at 63,736. I guess I'm just curious on that particular line item, and if I may, in that same section, fire training center, we're already at 96.7%. Are we on track there, or I know it's a small budget of 2,000, but is there going to be more? We're only halfway through the year. I guess that's my question. So those two line items under protective services have others, but just those two.
Administration.
Mr. Osmond.
To Councillor Haas through the chair, starting with the disaster services program. The issue there is that there were some costs associated with COVID-19 response that were accumulated in the code that we used in 2020 for COVID response. There was an operating project for it. And the collection of those costs continued in that account. Administration is going to work on making the entry to distribute those back out to the departments where their associated budgets are. So that number will be addressed. The second number, the fire training center, I unfortunately don't have any specific information on that one. However, what I can do is I can flag that so that when we come back with the second quarter report, if it isn't evident what's going on there, that we can provide a specific response to it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, all right. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 20, Division 4, at the very bottom, cemetery.
Sorry. Yes.
Councillor Race, you're on mute.
Good, you can hear it. Sorry. So at the very top, it shows budget. With cemetery, we're seeing, looks like a negative 947 or 947. I had thought that the flower basket program of, I think, $29,000 was given to the cemetery. And I thought the cemetery had started off, with 30-some thousand.
So just a clarification about the numbers we see in this report. It is a finance issue that the numbers that represent net revenues are negative. So what we're seeing in cemetery, that 947 in budget was a net revenue in the department. So that's why those numbers are like that. However, unfortunately, I don't have any information about the flower baskets. But if there isn't anybody else with that information, I can add that to the list of things that we bring some more information on.
Councillor Race.
I know there are people, I think, at this meeting who are familiar with the flower basket program and how the money was, was taken from that reserve and put into the cemetery. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Council, anything else? Other questions for administration? Council Nelson.
I'd like to move that council accept the 2021 financial operating update and capital status report from April 30th, 2021 for information. Thank you.
No comment or questions. I'll the question. The council accept the 2021 financial operating update and capital status report, April 30th, 2021 for information. All those in favor? That passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, administration and Mr. Osmond. Moving on to our next item. That is the Hinton Recreation Center improvements and expansion of the aquatic facility. I'll pass that over to administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report is before council tonight as a summary of the work performed on the site during council's term. The listing of motions is offered to support council review and understanding of the rationale and the intent of direction and decision made as it pertained to the Hinton Recreation Center improvements and expansion. Mr. Rousseau has put together a brief PowerPoint presentation with summary and interpretation of the motions, as well as some review of previously discussed process that may be relevant moving forward. The purpose of a potential workshop moving forward is to understand which direction should continue, what can be removed or condensed in the action pending list, and what may be revisited by council. So at this time, I'll turn things over to Mr. Russo to take us through that PowerPoint and to support conversation with council around this item.
Thank you, CA, also to the chair to council. This report or this presentation and the report has been driven by administration. It wasn't a deadline that we had to bring back. I remember back on April the 27th when this item was before council, that there was a conversation quite robust and quite helpful for us to say, where are we going to go with the recreation center and the possible expansion for the aquatic facility? And so that prompted me to have a conversation with CA also to say, you know, I've looked through all the motions. It's 31 of them. It speaks to an array of desires where council wanted to go since your election, and now you're going towards the end of your term. It would be nice to bring this back to refresh council as to what you were talking about over the 4 years. There's some good information in the motions, but I think it can lead us to an opportunity where I don't want to use the word 31 into one, even though that's what I'm saying in one of the slides, but it's a method of trying to maybe curtail some of the massive information and bring it down to an understanding of where we want to go as a council. And so what I've done is that the first slide is basically just what we're talking about. The second slide basically prompts us why we're discussing it today. Over the last 4 years, there's been at least 31 motions made when it pertains to the recreation facility. And it speaks to different elements of where you would like to go. So I wanted to provide you a holistic view and understanding to a large extent. I don't believe that we can get through the depths and the bones and the details of what the 31 motions entail, but it will give you an overview of 4 to 6 bullets, what I'm trying to establish here this evening. So,
sorry to interrupt, Mr. Russo. If you could share your screen, if you have the PowerPoint presentation on your computer, Ms. Rendell is requesting some support there. So. And then you can scroll through and take us through the slides.
all right, so I'll just go back to the first slide. So basically, that was just the introduction I made. So back to second slide. Over the last 4 years, you've had about 31 motions. And so I hope to give you a holistic overview and just refresh the memories again, what these motions meant. So slide 3, as you can see, the motions and topics they range from, but they are not limited to within the 31 motions. Establishing a recreation center project steering committee with the terms of reference. And there was a lot of conversation about that. I think it spanned over 2018 till about March to about July, the end of July 2018, where that committee and the terms of reference were discussed. And then eventually there was a terms of reference established, as well as a committee. Now, I will preface this that we don't really understand right now what happened to the committee, but that was probably put in abeyance because there was a timeline attached to how long that committee can be in effect. However, we will check that facts again. The second bullet says establishing a recreation center construction reserve fund. And if we go through some of those motions, council, you'll see that there was a discussion about trying every year to put about 240,000 into it. Then COVID hit us, and then we decided to extrapolate some of that funding to help us with a potential onslaught of the not increasing your taxes, but to let that supplement the two, the one over the other, balance it out to some extent. And then to determine a budget or a spending plan to evaluate the initial capital expenditure and the life cycle costs for the recreation facility. And there was quite a bit of conversation about that. And then finally, explore grants and pursue the integrated delivery model, which is the IPD, we call it for short, to initiate the project. And I think at that stage, that was April the 27th, council then said, okay, there is more discussions to come, but let's not hold up the process should the granting for the IPD model open up as well as the ISIP grant open up for us, which is supposed to be late fall this year. So the aim really is to, and as I said, condensing 31 motions, not likely to one, but at least to have a suite of understanding where we want to go as a council. With that, I've just, on slide 4, as you can see, the interpretation and the summary of the motion and the themes behind it. As you can see, on June the 19th, 2018, Council initiates that a Recreation Project Steering Committee, RPSC, with a term of reference be established. Then July the 17th, 2018, you establish that RPSC, which is the Recreation Project Steering Committee, with a term as a reference was adopted on July the 17th. Then going forward, a couple of months later, October the 11th, 2018, administration was to schedule a vision and setting session with council before the March 2019 meeting. Then March the 5th, 2019, council directed to add 240K to the Recreation Center construction reserve for each year following. Continuing with the theme of motions, July the 16th, 2019, the aquatic facility options was presented and showcased at various locations such as the Parks West Mall and as well as on our website, I believe. July the 16th, 2019, also council recommended that option 1A and 3A be brought back to October the 15th, 2019 council for a decision. Following on to 2020, April the 7th, the council then transferred that 240,000 from the recreation expansion reserve to a temporary emergency response reserve. Then May the 26th, 2020, council then sought the consensus that all recreation center action items remain unchanged until a further report comes back to council. And then on the action pending list we've had that's currently in force, we have the following motions that are still projected. Project funding plans to be prepared and brought to council. April the 27th, council directs us as administration to look at the Investing in Canada Infrastructure, ISA grant and others, and associated grants in parallel with looking into the IPD process, which is really how the procurement model will be. So that's a summary of the 31 motions and its themes. I took the liberty to put together maybe a summary and a possible next steps for council to consider this evening or to give us direction on. The reinstatement of the Recreation Project Steering Committee, what would that look like? Maybe bringing back what the existing one looked like that may have expired. There's also talk, or there was talk and discussion about having a project manager who would be dedicated to focusing on the recreation aquatic facility project so that those deliverables can be taken forward. And then of note that the recreation facility back then, based on some of the information that I dug out, you're probably looking at about a $36 million capital expenditure. If you go back to the ISIP grant, you probably can get about 78% of that ISIP or granted. So you'll have to come up with the other 32% or 28%, 22%, whatever that percentage works out to. That coupled with the other demands that you would have for Capital One, underground services, you've got a water plant that you may have to do a bypass, or you have to do a bypass sooner or later. When you put all of that into the bucket, what's the affordability for the town over the horizon of 0 to 5, 5 to 20 years perhaps? And I think that would be a good segue. The reason why CEO also now discussed this to bring it forward to council so that we could have a conversation very robust prior to the actual budget conversations happening, so that we can make an informed decision as to what is a priority for the town. That's where item 3 comes from. And then dovetailing with that is about maybe we should host a workshop with council administration to walk through these deep-seated issues and challenges and opportunities we have to make sure that the town is set up for success and that fiscally we can afford it in conjunction with granting. So with that, I wanted to just go to the final point. There was a consultant's report that was prepared of a possible roadmap that council could follow. And there's about 8 of them, and I've just listed them. Confirm the steering committee members, dovetails with what I said earlier on. Confirm the program, the schedule that you want to adopt to get going on, assuming it's under the rec facility that you want to get going with in the next foreseeable future. Develop a funding plan. How we're going to fund the $36 million and counting. Confirm the facility operating model and management structure. Have stakeholder and public engagement sessions, which we've had some of them, but now with it being maybe a refreshed approach, is it still a need? What are the details behind it? What is it going to look like? And it's been a while since we looked at renderings. And then prepare the concept design so that that could go out to the public and to other stakeholders And then we can develop the preliminary infrastructure plan for the town to see what's our affordability for this endeavor and the endeavors that council wish to follow for the next 0 to 5 years and beyond. With that, I will turn it back to the chair and we'll be open for any questions, council.
Thank you. Council, any questions for administration on the site? Councilor Nelson.
I'll make a direction. I'll make kind of a version of the second one first. So that committee direct administration to facilitate, and I'm changing up a little bit here, a live streamed and recorded workshop with council prior to 2022 budget deliberations to evaluate the town's infrastructure priorities with a focus on the recreation center improvements and possible expansion to include an aquatic facility. If I could speak to it for council versus the direction versus what was recommended, if it can come in a standing committee meeting, great. We only have one standing committee meeting in August. So if it's going to happen in the next 2 months, it could be tricky to accomplish at a standing committee. And the other part of it is including a workshop that's live streamed and recorded. And the reason I say that is the rec center process, even prior to our council, there seemed to be a lot of gaps. When our council came in, we're always trying to fill these gaps. And regardless of whether it's our council or a different council or whoever kind of takes this on next, I think being able to review and have that for context and understand the kind of the direction we're going. I also look at a couple of years ago when we pivoted to just an aquatic center instead of a recreation center. A lot of those conversations happen in camera and with architects and things like that. And I think somewhere in there we kind of lost our way with what the community was looking for and what vision the community had. And I think since then we've kind of been working to try to recapture some momentum with it. So with that, I'd love to have a workshop and try to get through. Seeing everything in 31 in a row is pretty eye-opening, and I appreciate those all being pulled together. Thank you.
Question for admin. Are our standing committee meetings not live streamed and recorded anyways?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. They are. I think what Councillor Nelson was getting at was that if this was a workshop outside of a standing committee meeting, that it'd still be live streamed and recorded. That's correct.
Okay, yeah, that to me it's just that within the motion itself it says standing committee meeting. So to me it seems redundant. Oh no, you changed it up.
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
apologize, Councillor Nelson. Apologize for that. I thought the live stream and recorded was the only change. My apologies. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, if I'd be in favor. I mean, we definitely need to get together as a council and administration and get this all straightened out. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, 31 motions, and I mean, I recall conversations in regards to the steering committee and how things kind of halted there, and it kind of was in limbo. And then, I mean, I think we really need to get, our head around, looking at those motions and get some definite direction. And I mean, I'm fine with it being live streamed and having it recorded. That's no issue with me at all. I think that's, only bodes well to also review if necessary for that conversation. So, and I think it's a separate, I mean, potentially if we can't have it standing, because I see this as a bigger conversation that maybe a standing committee might be able to accommodate both meetings and a workshop at the same time. So, but yeah, I'd be in favor of this. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Stash?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'd be in support of having a workshop regarding this. I think quite a few things have changed in our community through the last several years since this has been discussed, and we do need a discussion, a bit of a reset, and figure out where we're at in the process and what next steps are, and when those next steps happen too, I think is an important part of that conversation. You know, there's been some developments that have put some pressure on where our infrastructure dollars are going to need to be put towards. So it would be a good opportunity to have a discussion regarding demand on what we're going to be spending on infrastructure and maybe a reprioritization. I think this is all good opportunity to have discussions that encompass more than just the rec center. So I'm in favor of having a workshop to delve a little deeper into this.
Thank you, Councilor Stash. Anyone else on council wish to speak to the directional report? Councilor Ross.
I just have a quick question to administration, and I guess this is to CEO Olson, but also probably Mr. Osmond. But you spoke to how our next financials are going to give us a better understanding of COVID-2 and the impact of COVID on our community. So, I mean, I'm not, there's no date put on this, but I mean, for myself, I'd like to see that potentially to see where our community is at. You know, with the impacts of COVID, moving into a workshop like this, you know, might have another picture, another lens that we could look through. You know, there's also the reality too, and I applaud our neighbors who did some statistical data and how much money is being downloaded to us from the province, and that's also going to be probably a part of our conversation for the budget as well. I mean, you know, the future, you know, financial state of our community as in regards to and whether or not, you know, this is something you can take on right now. So, so my question is, yeah, will we get a good picture from the last those financials administration, so we have a better picture of COVID before going into a workshop like this?
Mr. Osmond.
So the second quarter financial update is scheduled for council at the end of August. And at that point, we'll get the picture through to June 30th. It will give you a good picture up to that point, and I think you will have a good indicator of what impacts of COVID in 2021 will look like. But we may struggle to get a full picture of what that looks like, just because of the time lag as we pick up some of the services and things come back online. It will have a good idea, I think, about what that impact looks like, but the big picture number, unfortunately, sometimes finance is a little bit of fortune telling, and I'm not quite sure how much of that I can tell you we won't have.
And if I may, I mean, that's understandable, Mr. Osmond. I totally understand. I think we have a better picture from that financial than we do from this one. And that's all that I guess I'm you know, thinking about moving forward into a workshop like this. So thank you, administration.
Council, anyone else? Oh, sorry, say it.
Sorry. So through the chair to council, we can sequence these so that council receives that information first. Already the meetings in August are filling up. So planning ahead for the workshop to take place. It may be that it's in our best interest to have that outside of the regular council schedule. So through the agenda prep committee, we can make sure that council has that information before we start moving into discussion around this item and other financial pressures, I suppose, from capital items moving forward.
Councilor Nelson.
Yeah, I appreciate the sentiment, although like the second quarter financials to me won't have a huge bearing on a project the size of a rec center. To me, it's more our reserve levels, our debt limit, and the water treatment facility, and any other like major capital expenditures. A second quarter update, especially the way the finances work, is going to show you the percent of budget spent. I don't think it'll give us a clear picture that would impact that discussion at all. So to me, as long as we can understand some of the really big stuff, I'm not as worried about sequencing, and I wouldn't want to see a rec center workshop be delayed just waiting on quarterlies personally. So to me, it's less important. Thank you.
All right, council, anyone else? If not, then I will call the question on the board. That committee direct administration to facilitate a live streamed and recorded workshop with council prior to 2022 budget deliberations to evaluate the town's infrastructure priorities with a focus on the recreation center improvements and possible expansion to include an aquatic facility. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. Council, anything else for the site? Councilor Nelson.
I'd like to move that that committee accept the Hinton Recreation Center improvements and expansion of the aquatic facility report for information. Yep.
Council, any comment or question on direction on the board? Okay. Call it that committee accept the Hinton Recreation Center improvements and expansion of the aquatic facility report for information. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. And one last time, council, anything else for this item? Thank you, administration. We'll move on to our next item, which is that'll be item 4, Maxwell Lake Bridge Rehabilitation. Pass that over to administration.
Mr. Chair. Council provided direction on the Maxwell Lake Bridge project at the end of April to bring the project's scope details, timeline, and deliverables to a meeting no later than the end of July. Administration reviewed the additional requests made by council, including the lowering of the bridge and the modification of the balustrades of the bridge. The report before council tonight includes more detailed project variables, including costs and additional AEP requirements. The cost estimates included are not expected to be exceeded. However, through the procurement process and that the open market may produce a more representative project cost that could be lower than what has been discussed in this report. Mr. Rousseau and Ms. Daly Beckford are here to help answer questions. So I will turn it over to council.
Thank you, CEO Olson. Council, questions for admin? Councilor Nelson.
What is the timeline for the Beaver Boardwalk committee to come together? And with that in mind, would they have an opportunity to review this prior to coming to council on August 24th?
Administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the terms of reference were approved just recently, and a timeline I don't think has been developed necessarily yet. The intention of the group is to have some input into the budget process for 2022 and the future of the boardwalk there. The recruitment process, the posting to the community to communicate that this is open as a committee, that the different criteria of the terms of reference people could apply to. That will likely take a little bit of time, and then to council as an update prior to the committee getting started. So I think it's likely that it'll be into September before the committee is struck and it starts getting down to work. So there's the opportunity before budget comes forward to have that input, but it'll be close.
Yeah, by default, that just helps me understand the type of engagement that I think us as council will need to do. If that committee's in place, it might reduce the amount that we need to go out and seek, and there could be redundancies there, but understanding it won't be in place likely before then. It just helps with that. So thank you.
I have Councilor Race and Councilor Haas. Councillor Riss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Option 1 and 2 talk about the cost of a complete hydrotechnical investigation of up to $20,000 to $40,000. Is that on top of the total that we're seeing for each option?
Administration.
Through the council race, that is in addition to the construction costs and engineering costs.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hotz.
Yeah, just thank you, Mr. Chair. Good question about option 4 brings removing it altogether and salvaging it. Just curious on maybe if option 5 has to remove and then construct a boardwalk bridge. Like, I'm just curious on why that one potentially wasn't also part of the option if we were, because if we remove it, we have to replace it with something in that area. So I'm just curious, is that an option that's on the table as well to create then a more simplistic, I guess, bridge in that area?
Administration.
Yes, so through the chair to council, we did have that discussion as administration. That means basically removing existing bridge, removing some of the remainder of the former bridge, and then constructing a new bridge that is of a pedestrian friendly type, no vehicle access. And we did the rough math on that anyway. Afterwards, once the report was into council, you're looking at about 100,000, 120,000 to do that. The caution that I would throw, not that it's possible, is that the grant that we have in place right now does not account for replacement of another bridge that is of a lesser structural integrity. So that 120,000 and change will likely have to be borne by taxpayer dollars.
Okay, so if I may clarify, so that ICIP or that grant will not cover anything then if we were to do that.
Yeah, it will just cover the connectivity and some of the decking. And the lowering of the bridge itself could qualify because it helps with wheelchair accessibility.
Right.
But if we remove the bridge and we replace it with another lesser structural integrity type bridge, then you will have to bear that cost as a top.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hotz. Councillor Riss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Option 4 also talks about removal and salvage of the existing bridge. When you talk about salvage, is that we're going to sell it for scrap, or are we looking to sell it to the county or other municipalities? What would we do with the bridge if we did take it out?
Administration.
Through to the chair to council, yes, and it's not about we'll salvage it for an alternate purpose. We'll look at it, do we have a use for it in the town, first and foremost? If not, we will then go to our neighbors or other municipalities and say, we have this bridge. Are you interested? And they could likely buy it off us, and that could likely offset some of our costs. Or the last, less favorable one would be we remove it and put it in our infrastructure until such time that we have a use for it or somebody wants to buy it from us. So those are 3 options, council.
Thank you.
Council. Any other questions? Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, and this is not the direction I'm going, but I'd be remiss to ask it. If the removal was chosen, could the ICIP grant be shifted over to fund portions of the boardwalk repair, not necessarily the bridge repair? So fixing existing sections that need repair in the coming years anyways.
Through the chair to council, that would be a question and that we can ask them. I'm not averse to ask that question because I think it still complies with the scope of work in terms of boardwalk and accessibility. So we could ask that question to the ICIP grantor.
Yeah, I guess if I could follow up, I'm personally very much of the mindset that it's there and we need to make the best of it. That said, from a big part of not removing it came down to it's going to cost us more in the long run. I've actually talked to a lot of citizens that have said, if you guys are going to remove it, then it's just gone. You don't have a crossing there anymore. And I actually if we're going to remove it, then I would only be in favor of that if we weren't replacing it with something. But if we spent 50 grand to remove it, and then we had 300 grand in order to fix and correct and help the rest of the boardwalk, then we're not throwing good money after bad necessarily. So I'm putting it out there for council's consideration. Not that it's my opinion, but it's one of those things that I've heard out there. To remove it, I struggle even environmentally and ecologically to go in and put all the rig mats down, do all the work to pull out a bridge, just to go back in and start disrupting it again. So from an environmental perspective, to remove a bridge, to just put another bridge back, it just doesn't work in my head. And I can't imagine sitting at AEP's desk and having an application to remove and then rebuild again. Like it lacks, to me, just a basic level of common sense that I struggle with. So I'm of a lot of minds of this, but for me, I'd rather just build the connections and be done with it. But there's lots of different ways we can go with this now that the removal cost is far less than we had expected. So, thank you.
Councillor Haas.
Just a quick question about, just for clarification for if public is watching and stuff, obviously, but option one, because we did talk about the handrails, we talked about the lowering, and if you can speak to maybe the bridge modification handrails being $81,000, you know, I can see the lowering of it maybe, but that in particular, because in my mind, you whack them off and you lower it, right? I mean, Old Town Farmer, you have to take a cut-off saw, cut them off and weld them back on. But can you talk to us a little bit about that cost, just to clarify why so much?
Yeah. So through to the chair to council, that's a very good question. I was hoping that would come up. So the 81,000 is a direct relationship to the balustrade of the railing being the main carrying member, structural member for the bridge. At the time, when we talked early on before this report was asked to come forward, we did not look at the bridge's structural integrity, what is carrying what. So when we looked at it a little deeper, and the other component we did as well, we have included a contractor to help us to look at actual costs. So the cost you see in front of you, just to divert a little bit the conversation, is actually type cost that can be less once we go to the free market, because you have that as design build factor. Back to the railing wise, 81,000. That's why I did the math to say, should we replace this bridge, you're looking at 100 to 120,000 over 81,000 on an existing bridge that you modify. So that member will have to be totally removed, and then we'll have to do an under stiffening of the bridge to be specific about it, so that we can still carry pedestrians over it. Hence the $81,000 cost.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Russell.
Council, anything else? Councillor Haas.
Just a move that the committee direct administration to bring the Maxwell Lake Bridge Rehabilitation report to regular council on August 24th, 2021 for decision.
Speak to that, Councillor.
You know, I mean, it's a good, thank you for the report. It brings different options. It gives an opportunity for us to get, you know, we've already, I think, received some feedback from the community based on it, and get some more before August 24th, and then, you know, and make that the best call at the time where we want to go with this. So, great. Thank you.
Council, anyone else? Okay. Seeing nobody else, I'll call it then. The committee direct administration to bring the Maxwell Lake Bridge Rehabilitation Report to regular council meeting on August 24th, 2021 for decision. All those in favor? That passed unanimously. Councilor Nelson.
So I did have another question on the item, but it doesn't impact whether it comes to council or not. One of the things that the option to lower the structure, if we lower the structure, does that impact any other costs of the project? So landing ramps, screw piles, that sort of thing?
Administration.
Through to the chair to council. No, it doesn't impact the cost that you have listed in front of you. Lowering of the bridge, basically where the cost comes in, you've got that AEP. a hydrotechnical study because they want to see what the impact is of the highest water elevation, what the impact is of debris coming down that could damage the under members, those type of things. Unfortunately, that study wasn't done at the time the original bridge was done. They would not have been speaking about, we would have been able to go ahead. The good news is if we do go with the loading of the bridge, we can actually get close to that, if not more, to that 450 millimeters to, because you need 300 freeboarders, they call it, above the water level, and then the underside should be, right now we're in the region of about 900 and change. So that was good news when we looked at that as well. The big thing, of course, the hydrotechnical study is no guarantee that AEP will give us what we're desiring. However, having spoken to a few locals, or one or two locals myself when I was on the bridge, there is some good empirical information that some of the residents can share with the geotechnical input that will happen and geotechnical input that will happen. So,
Councilor Nelson.
Yeah, the reason I ask, I think one of the original conversations we had is that if we lower the bridge, you'll require less grade for Boardwalk, and potentially you could be saving on the cost of the Boardwalk that you build up to the bridge. For me, I struggle with spending 32 grand plus the study to lower a bridge by that far on a pretty big structure. I just don't think it is at this point the best value for dollars, but that's one of the things we can go out and ask those questions between now and coming back to regular council. But if it doesn't reduce other costs, I struggle to put a pretty big chunk of money to impact it by less than half a meter. So thank you.
Council, anything else on this item?
Just
Councilor Haas.
Just to clarify, I know Councilor Grace asked this question, but I just wanted to clarify. So where I'm looking at option 1 and I believe option 2 both require the hydro-technical investigation. Where in that chart, what line would that be included, just to see it, or is it not? It's not. It's on top of that line. Oh, okay. All right. I just wanted to confirm that. I wasn't sure. But okay, appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. There's nothing else for this item. We'll move on to our item number 5, CAO bylaw number 1159 and CAO oversight committee bylaw number 1147. Administration.
Mr. Chair. So work has been ongoing on these items over the last year with the Performance Review Committee providing review and updates to these documents. At this time, a legal review is also taking place before council discussion. Members of the committee, as well as Ms. Hope, are present to assist with any discussion or questions that council may have at this time.
Council, over to us. Questions for administration? Councilor Nelson.
This is page 45 of 99 and 3.2.1. It speaks of hire, dismiss, promote, demote, reward, discipline any municipal employee. What does, there's not a definition for reward, but what does that entail?
Administration.
So reward, as it's not defined within the bylaw, could be bonus or additional days in lieu, or so through COVID, through our EOC and our SLT, additional days were provided due to the requirement of so much overtime to be worked. So additional wellness day or two. So that would be another example of the reward. Ms. Hope, is there any other kind of reward that you're aware of that would fit into that category?
Yes, thank you. I would add, it could be something as simple as a letter of not necessarily a recommendation, but recognizing good work that has been done.
Thank you, Council. Council. Councilor Nelson again.
So on the following page, 3.3.3F, it speaks that the CAO must consult and inform council prior to major changes. I guess, what does consult mean? And I guess where it gets caught up is does that mean council is like, I guess I just want it to be a slippery slope of council feeling like they're doing more than just being given the heads up, and not debating and not doing those sorts of things. So
So Lisa?
I'm sorry, I did not hear that.
that's okay.
Hi, Emily, Councillor Nelson, I heard your question. So sorry. So this would be council's opportunity to let the CA know exactly how they felt about what decision that was going to be made, what opinions they had, and what consequences they saw for the CAO should the decision be made, whether they supported it or not, and give the CAO a chance to respond or potentially change their decision. So it allows the CAO to maintain the authority over structural changes, but allows council to have a chance for their opinion and to let her know what him or her know what would happen should those decisions be made, and still be part of it, but again, keeping authority with the CAO.
Councilor Nelson.
Yeah, I do have concerns with that, because I think a future council or future administration could read that and think, and we've had this with our previous bylaw where it wasn't necessarily clear, and the word consult makes it seem as though council could have a bigger role than they're legislatively able to have on the process. Because if we're being consulted rather than informed, and we say no, then we can't do that. But that's kind of what consultation is to me. So the informed council I love. Just consult to me is troublesome based on some of the things over the last 4 years that we've seen. So I'm not going to propose an amendment. It's had legal review, and if administration feels it appropriate, I'm just more flagging it as something. So thank you.
Councilor Stash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When committee discussed this clause in particular, yeah, the intent is not that the CAO consults council to seek council's approval, but we did want to make sure that there was consult and they're not just informed, because it enables a two-way conversation between the CAO and council regarding what the CAO is planning to do, gives the CAO opportunity to get feedback from council on council's thoughts on it, if they think that it's a good idea or not. And with the understanding, though, that council is not either granting or denying approval. It's still the CAO's decision, but it gives an opportunity to have a good two-way conversation between the CAO and council, so the CAO is fully aware of what council thinks about what they're planning to do. I think it's an important thing to have in there, and I think with that in there, as long as there's the understanding that it's not seeking approval, that it can promote some good dialogue between a CAO and council. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Stash. Councilor Nelson.
I'd like to make a motion to amend bylaw number 1159 to include a definition of consult. And for clarity, I think kind of what Councilor Stashik said is the types of things that would be included in that definition. I think it just provides a level of clarity to anybody else that's reading this in the future that, you know, maybe was part of the development or in this meeting. And I agree that all of those things are important. It's just making sure that council doesn't feel that they're entitled to have more of a say than they should have. So thanks for that clarification, Councilor Stashik.
Perfect. Council, any comment or any questions have been made on the proposed direction? I guess I have one. Administrator, where would this fit into the actual bylaw?
Thank you. So I could put it under F and say, for the purpose of this clause, consult means da, 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 da. Or there is a definition section, section 8. And I could put it under section 8. I don't believe the word consult is anywhere else in this bylaw. So that would be fine too. But before I did that, I would do a search just to double check that consult wasn't anywhere else.
I guess my next question, should we specify where this definition should go, or just leave that to admin to put it in where they best see fit?
Mr. Chair, I think it's administration can find where it fits best.
Okay.
And Ms. Hope's search for it elsewhere, just to make sure that that definition is in line with the other use of that word elsewhere. It does occur in the bylaw.
Thank you. Council, any other comment on the, or questions on the direction on the board? Councilor Haas.
Just a quick, because I know this has gone through legal review already, but that seems like a significant word to define. Is it easy to get a legal opinion just on that particular definition afterwards?
Administration.
I think, Mr. Chair, a legal review of the result is something that we could seek. It would be really quick.
Mhm.
I think given the intention and the discussion around this, we have a fairly good idea of what that should state, just as long as it doesn't, I guess, contradict anything else within the bylaw. It should be pretty straightforward.
Okay, thank you.
So, all right, council. If there's nothing else, I'll question up. The committee directed administration to amend CAO bylaw number 1159 to include a definition of consult. All those in favor? That passed unanimously. Council, anything else for this item? Councilor Nelson.
I guess before I make the direction, the recommendation is all the readings and unanimous consent. Are we able to just make a direction that it comes to council for decision?
Yes. Mr. Chair, through to council, absolutely. I was going to offer that to council a little bit earlier. A simple direction to bring it for decision is absolutely appropriate.
Thanks, administration, for that in mind, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that committee recommend bylaw number 1159 come to council for decision.
Council, any discussion on the direction? I want to thank the administration for that clarification, as that saves me a lot of talking. Do we need
I'm with moving it. I'm going to leave it open ended. Let the agenda prep committee deal with it. So I'm fine with being dateless.
no other questions or comments? We'll get that up on the board. That committee recommend bylaw number 1159 be brought to a regular council meeting for decision. All those in favor? That was unanimous. Anything else for this item, council? If not, we will move ahead with item number 6. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Chair. There was a second bylaw that's tied to the first, so they were brought together in the report because they kind of influence each other. So if council wants to provide some direction on bylaw number 1147.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Sorry for the oversight. Councillor Ross.
I'd like to direct or move that committee direct administration to bring bylaw number 1147 to regular for decision.
Great, council. While we're waiting to get that up on the board, any comment or questions with regards to that direction? Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. Should we have a date attached to that?
If I may,
Yeah.
I again leave it in the hands of the agenda prep, and I'm assuming it'll come at the same time as the previous one because it's connected. So I think I'm just going to leave it open to their hands.
Councillor Race.
I'm only saying that because Sandra had said at one time, if a motion was written on a piece of paper and fell to the floor, you should be able to pick it up and know the why, what, where, when. So even though we know that we have a regular at this date, I think it should be added to this motion.
If I may, we didn't add a date to the previous motion or direction, and like I said, this one's connected. So I don't want to add a date to this one if we haven't added a date to the previous one. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to again leave it with the date.
Ask administration.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, so in situations like this where there is no date included in a direction or decision of council, in reviewing the action pending list, CAO will put in the due date, usually with the consideration of workload and timing and the urgency of the item to come back. As well, it's discussed at the agenda prep committee meetings where we figure out where the sequencing of items and when they're going to come before council. So with the urgency of this item to be completed within this council's term, as the bulk of the work has been done through this council term, it will come likely before the end of September. The little bit of flexibility is appreciated just in case there are emerging items that need to be on council agendas for August. I think should this motion fall on the floor, and the analogy that you used that Ms. Randall had given, I think we'd still be in good shape. We understand what council's looking to do. They'd like to have this item come back for decision. So I think the administration's in good shape to bring this back in the next month or two.
Okay, good. Good.
Thanks, administration. With that said, I guess any other comment or question from council on the direction of the board? Councilor Nelson.
My only question with this one is it refers to other policies that we haven't approved. So do we have to approve all the policies within it prior to approving it? Like 1108 is cited within the bylaw, but we haven't approved 1108 yet. So I'm just curious on a sequencing thing when it does come to regular.
I'll let Ms. Hope if that's something that she can speak to.
I'll do my best. Ones that I've referenced are the ones in the accompanying report that you guys are looking at next. So I imagine both things would happen concurrently. That we should be okay with that. That was my intent in having this all before you guys at once. That's my answer.
Councilor Nelson.
Yeah, I think just something to be aware of depending on how 1108 or other ones go, and just making sure that we're sequencing in a way that we're not approving something that forces us to approve another thing, but it's all coming at the same time, so I don't see it being a significant issue. So, thanks.
If there's nothing else, I'll get it up on the board and call the question. All right, that committee direct administration to bring CAO Oversight Committee bylaw number 1147 to the regular council meeting for decision. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you, admit. Anything else on this item? Or forge ahead? If not, then I'll move to item number 6, CAO recruitment and performance management policies, and I'll hand it over to administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As with the previous items, these documents have seen substantial review and revision over the last year. The updated documents reflect best practice and create clear and efficient processes. Members of the committee and Ms. Hope will continue to provide support for this discussion with the council tonight.
Thank you, CEO Olson. Council is now ours. Questions? Councilor Nelson.
Page 72 of 99. I'm a spreadsheet guy, so I really like this layout and find it a little easier to process. I have a couple questions. I guess one of the questions I have just overall to council is we haven't gone through a process of a CAO performance review as per the as per the bylaw that's currently in place. And part of me is like, I wish we had done it once to see what the process actually looks like, because I think it would really help educate us and on what the process should look like. So I guess with the committee, are we going to do a CAO performance review as per the old, or as per the currently approved bylaw where it's set as dates, so May's and April, May, or are we planning to not do one, or are we planning on doing one if we approve this one in time?
That was a question for.
Well, I guess to me, like I would put that to the chair of the committee, but in his absence, I guess anybody else that's on the committee. Just we have our bylaw lays out that our performance reviews happen in May of each year, which I understand why we change it to be on anniversary dates. But I would love to have done one to help inform this process. So for planning, whether we're planning on doing one or not doing one.
I'll put that to somebody from the review committee able to answer that. Admit any insight?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So without having the changes approved formally by council at a council meeting, and without knowing how that conversation is going to go and what that approval looks like, I believe that a performance review has been scheduled for the end of August, and it would come after the time that council would see this, should it come on August 24th. However, if there's any delay in bringing this forward, I think it's safe to say that the previous bylaw and policies around CAO performance review would be followed, as there isn't really enough time to follow this exactly with the timeline. There are items within this that are weeks out from that performance date. So I'm assuming that we would just be following what is laid out previously for this time. And then it would put us in a good position, or put council in a good position to follow this time frame moving forward past that date.
I appreciate CAO Olson's logic on that, and I follow the same logic. We have a bylaw in place. We follow it until anyone has been enacted, but it's really up to the CAO committee. So I don't think the CAO can schedule her own performance review. So,
Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The CEO Performance Review Committee has been following the existing bylaw. There's been discussions between the Performance Review Committee and the CAO and the latest annual review. It is scheduled.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can follow, Mr. Chair,
Yep.
is it scheduled prior to this coming back to council to help us inform the new documentation?
CEO Olson.
I think, Mr. Chair, if it helps, I have received a meeting invitation for the end of August, August 28th. There's an intention to bring these documents back for the 24th, but again, barring anything urgent coming up, it may be pushed to September 7th, I think is the next meeting. So I suppose that the definitive answer to whether or not this will come before, it really remains to be seen through your agenda prep committee and then the next steps, planning those meetings.
Councillor Stasher.
Thank you. I was just, sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I was just going through my calendar just to see when it was scheduled for. I knew it was scheduled, but I don't have photographic memory. So barring this one, anything happening with it, we're working under the assumption that we're moving forward under the existing performance review bylaw. And there is a preliminary CEO performance review meeting scheduled for Monday, August 23rd. And then CEO performance review meeting itself is scheduled for Thursday, August 26th. So barring that, I can't say if that's going to happen before or after this one comes back to council for approval. It's after, and I'm not sure what would happen with the dates that are already scheduled. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stasher. Councillor. Councillor Ross.
Okay, I'd like to direct the committee recommend council rescind policy number 098, town manager recruitment. There's 3 of them here, so I'm just going to do them all. So in one, the committee recommend council approve CEO recruitment policy 1109 as presented. And the council recommend council approve CEO performance review number 1108 and attachments as presented. Good, yeah. I mean, these are all coming back to regular for decision. We've had an opportunity to review them, ask any questions tonight. Of course, we've got more time to do that. So, you know, I appreciate the comments being made about the timelines, but just, you know, based on the timeline, we have a bylaw in place like anything else, and we follow that bylaw until there's a new one, and foreseeable, you know, if it can work, it can. If it can't, well, we work with what we currently have. So, but we have the, you know, it's in now the agenda preps hands to get this on the agenda in the future meetings. So say,
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Councillor Nelson.
I did have a question, and I'm going to ask it before it's approved because the motion is as presented. On that page 72 of 99, one of the questions I had for the committee is on the 5th line where it talks about 5 weeks prior. It says that the committee determined internal staff, and then it references internal staff a couple more times. I have concerns about not having a baseline of consistent staff. I think previously it was direct reports. I wouldn't want a situation where you have different types of people bringing in different situations. To me, the performance review should be a really consistent group, council, and then whatever those people are, if it's direct reports or it's director level or however it is. If there's a need to bring in additional people for specific reasons, then I think that may be appropriate, but I don't think that the internal staff should change with each formal annual review personally. Just looking for context on that.
I'll put that to members of the committee and also support staff that helped.
Mr. Chair, sorry, if I could just ask a person again, sorry, Councillor Nelson, where Where was that you were referring to?
72 of 99.
And that's specifically the 5 weeks prior to review date.
Yeah, and then it's referenced a couple times below that.
So the internal staff that's referring to is defined on page 69, section 7.6.1. This must be a minimum of 3 staff members, of which a minimum 2 report directly to the CEO, and at least 1 must be a manager. It's a little more fluid than just director, because if there's like a significant turnover in directors and suddenly you only have directors that have only worked with the CEO for like a few months, they might not be able to give such a complete picture as a manager who's been there a little bit longer.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I guess my only concern is having a council that is looking for confirmation bias and going out and either intentionally seeking really good feedback or intentionally seeking poor feedback based on a whim of a group. But I think the way it's laid out, it somewhat protects that. And I do get making sure that you've got some people that have more experience with the CAO. So I think that is, I think I'm okay with that. Thank you, Ms. Hope. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Council, anything else? Okay, not seeing anyone else in queue. The committee recommend council rescind policy 098 town manager recruitment. The committee recommend council approve CAO recruitment policy number 1109 as presented. And that committee recommend council approve CAO performance review policy number 1108 and attachments as presented. All those in favor? That was unanimous. Thanks to administration and the committee. Anything else for this item, council? Okay, seeing none. Move on to our next item, which information items. 1, accessible transportation service usage update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this report is meant to provide some data to council on ridership stats for the accessible transportation services provided by the town. Prior to this meeting, this information was provided to council just as an information item that wasn't really spoken to. I just wanted to make sure that council, in context of this meeting, had this information in more or less a report form to kind of walk through the data that's been collected. At this time, it's just meant for information for council. If there's any questions, I believe Ms. Bouchard had to log off. I can do my best to answer the questions or take them away and provide some information to council at a later date.
Thank you, CEO Olson. Council? Councilor Nelson.
I'd like to move that committee accept the accessible transportation service usage update report for information. If I can speak to it, I love the data. This data is challenging to have meaning with just because of COVID and all the restrictions. And to me, it's good to know, but probably not something that will impact our future decisions for accessible transportation. Thank you.
Council, anything else? Seeing nothing, I'll put it up on the board, please. All right, the committee accept the accessible transportation service usage update report for information. Council, all those in favor? That passed unanimous. Thank you Ben, for that. And we move on to reporting. Council, I guess I'll start off with Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. Nothing to report.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a whole lot. Last Friday, another Alberta Water Council project started. So it's watershed governance and capacity committee, AUMA has asked me once again to represent municipalities. So important to know that there's no cost to Hinton taxpayers for that project, but certainly some value in having Hinton represented, and also learning more about watershed governance, same as there's a huge value with the wetland policy. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Councilor Stasher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have nothing to report this week.
Councilor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one thing, and that was waste management. We had our final board meeting with the contractor, brought to get back a final report. And so next steps now are the Mr. Kreiner is sending out to all CAOs, and that the report is completed and getting on the agenda. And then the contractor will be also attending those meetings as well to walk through each council through that report and the recommendations that are being made. So that's where we're at.
Councilor Haas. I myself have, Councilor Nelson.
Sure. And just if it's appropriate and if it's known by Councilor Haas, is there a timeline for that? Like, is it going to potentially impact 2022 budgets?
We are looking at quite an aggressive timeline. Yes, we're looking at potentially making that decision with current councils and starting that process. And so the contractor had a wider time frame, and we as a board decided that we'd like to shorten that up. So yeah, so it could potentially, yes, be part of that budget process.
Thank you, Councilor Haas. Thanks for indulging, Mr. Chair.
And yep, I had nothing to report. Any urgent matters, council? Seeing none. Move on. Chief Administrative Officer, CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's not too much to update council on this time around. Administration has been working on preparation for a new council orientation, including solidifying some dates. And so the intention there is to put out some of that information prior to the election so that folks that are looking to run can understand what dates they will need to set aside for their orientation. So that's underway and should be pretty exciting to confirm. Other than that, I'll take a look at council action pending list. We just saw this list a couple of weeks ago, so not a whole lot of material change, just a number of items that have been back and work to complete or have had some comments updated within the list. So that's really all the update that I had for this meeting.
Yeah, Councilor Haas.
Just a comment, not a question, but I do really appreciate that work on the orientation. I go back to when I got on council, and it was very unclear, and unfortunately I missed out on some due to work obligations. So I really appreciate the work being done ahead of time to give potential councilors in there that heads up and could make some accommodations. So that's I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilor Haas. Legislative services update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have nothing to report.
Take that. We have a few closed session items. Councilor Haas.
I'd like to move in private. Move in private, please.
Closed session.
Closed session. Sorry.
All right. Council, all those in favor? All right. We're moving into closed session.
Mr. Chair, do we have a couple minutes?
Yeah, take a 5-minute break.